A TISA officer grabbed her by the wrist, yanked her out of line, and shouted, "You do not belong here," all because she was a quiet black teen in a hoodie. But when she pulled out her undiplomatic passport, the entire airport fell silent. What they thought was just another girl turned out to be the daughter of one of the world's most powerful ambassadors. And what happened next shattered the system from the inside. "She is acting suspicious," the officer barked, pointing at me with a trembling finger. "Step out of the line now." His voice pierced through the terminal like a gunshot. That is how it started. I was not yelling. I was not arguing. I was not even talking. I was just standing in line. Buds in, hoodie up, waiting to go through TSA like everyone else at JFK International Airport. But suddenly, I was surrounded. One officer grabbed my wrist. Another snatched my carry-on. Passengers stared, some whispering, some filming, most just watching. I was 17 and flying alone for the first time from Geneva to New York. My name is Amani Grace Thompson, and I am a quiet girl. I read books on long flights. I wear sneakers with mismatched laces. I hum songs when I am nervous. And on that day, I wore my favorite hoodie gray, oversized, with a stitched dove on the chest. My mother bought it for me the day she passed away. It makes me feel safe. But to Officer Linda Cartwright, it made me look dangerous. She stepped forward with her aviator sunglasses still on. Indoors, like she thought it gave her more power. Her nameplate gleamed. Cartwright, TSA supervisor. Her lips curled slightly as if my presence offended her. She had sharp cheekbones, lipstick too red, and a voice trained to cut. "Remove your hood. Step to the side." She snapped. I paused my music, pulled down the hood. "Is there a problem?" Her eyes narrowed. Dante questioned me. I glanced at the family behind me, a white couple with a child on a leash. The kid had just thrown a juice box across the floor, and no one said a word. But here I was, being told I was agitated and combative when I had not even raised my voice. I tried to stay calm. "Madam, I am a U.S. citizen. I just came off a diplomatic flight. You can scan my passport. That is enough." She interrupted. "Step out. We will do a secondary screening. Your attitude is enough cause." Attitude? What does attitude even mean when you are black in America? Standing quietly, minding your business, my chest tightened. I felt every stare burning into my back. People were not seeing a teenager. They were seeing a threat. I followed her. Of course, what choice did I have? They led me through a side door, cold white walls, flickering fluorescent lights overhead. It was not a proper room. It was more like a box metal bench. Security camera in the corner. No windows. They told me to sit. They took my bag. They did not ask, "Do you have drugs? Weapons? Anything sharp?" No. "Why are you traveling alone?" "I am going home. I live in Detains." "And what were you doing in Geneva?" "My father's a diplomat." Cartwright raised an eyebrow. "That's so." She glanced at another officer, who smirked. "Where's your documentation?" I slowly reached into my backpack. It is in my passport folder. Hands out where I can see them." She barked. I froze. My fingers trembled. Cartwright did not look afraid. She looked excited, like she wanted a reason to escalate. When she finally took the folder from my hand, she did not even open it. She tossed it on the metal table, folded her arms, and stared at me. "Tell me the truth," she said. "How did a girl like you get into a diplomatic flight? A girl like me?" I looked up at her. My voice cracked, but I kept it steady. "You mean a black girl?" Silence. No apology. No denial. Just silence. Then she laughed, a short, dry laugh that never touched her eyes. "I mean a minor who thinks she can play games at an airport. You think that blue passport gives you immunity. Honey, it does not mean squat here." I swallowed hard. That passport was real. It was issued by the United Nations. It was signed by the Secretary General. It was stamped in capitals from Addis Ababa to Brussels. But to her, it was just another prop in a game she thought she was winning. For 30 minutes, I sat in that room. I heard announcements echoing from the Gates families reuniting. Flights boarding. My phone buzzed with missed messages. My father was waiting at arrivals. I could picture his worried face. And yet, no one came. No one knocked. Cartwright opened my passport halfway, rolled her eyes, and tossed it back. "Nice try." She muttered. I felt rage, thick like molasses, rising in my throat. But I did not scream. I did not cry. I sat up straighter. I remembered what my father always said. "When they doubt your worth, let them choke on your truth." So I waited. I waited as they rifled through my bag, as they mocked the books I brought, as they searched for something, anything, to justify their prejudice. But the thing they did not know: the camera above was not fake. The microphone was not muted. And what happened in that room would not stay hidden. They thought they were detaining a scared black teen. What they did not know was that I was about to make the world watch. I was born with a diplomat's last name, but raised like any other little girl in Southeast Detains, with scraped knees, scuffed shoes, and a soft spot for blueberry Pop-Tarts. My name is Amani Grace Thompson. I am 17 years old, a girl of quiet storms. My father, Ambassador Malcolm Elijah Thompson, is a man of speeches, handshakes, and endless patience. He speaks 7 languages fluently, but always said the language he most feared was silence, because that is where injustice hides. I used to watch him iron his suits before a flight to Nairobi or Brussels, always folding the lapels just so, always knotting his tie with reverence. A diplomat's tie, he would say, must never tremble, even when your voice does. My mother, Isha Lauren Thompson, was a humanitarian surgeon. She believed healing went deeper than sutures. She called me her peace treaty, said I had her eyes and his stubbornness. She passed when I was 13 in Sierra Leone, while performing emergency surgery during a flood. She never made it back. And so, at 13, I buried her with a photo of me wearing that gray hoodie. She told me never to take it off when I missed her. That hoodie is what they judged me for. They did not see Geneva. They did not see the 3 model and awards I won before 16. They did not see me speaking at Palais des Nations to a room of foreign ministers on youth-led diplomacy. They did not see the United Nations passport with the gold-embossed crest I carried in my bag. All they saw was a black girl in a hoodie at the airport, in that sterile holding room. I kept replaying my mother's voice. She would have told me not to flinch, that dignity was not something they could take, only something you gave away. So I did not cry. I counted breaths. I focused on details. Officer Cartwright's right thumb had chipped nail polish. She repeatedly checked the clock, but refused to update her supervisor. The overhead mic blinked green. That meant it was recording. My phone, still on airplane mode, vibrated once, meaning someone had activated tracking. It had to be my father. He always told me, if you are ever detained abroad or at home, say nothing. Let the weight of the truth build like a dam, and when it breaks, let it flood. So I waited for the flood. 1 year ago, I watched my father confront the UN Security Council after a racial attack on a peacekeeping mission. He did not raise his voice. He told a story about a soldier who disobeyed an unjust order and saved 20 lives. You want peace, he said that day. Then you must protect the dignity of those without armor. He looked right into the cameras, into the eyes of ambassadors and tyrants alike. And I swear half the room blinked first. That is the man waiting for me at arrivals. And somewhere in that airport, I knew he was already moving mountains. But what people do not realize about being the child of someone important is that it does not protect you from suspicion. It makes you a bigger target, because when they feel your power but can't see your badge, they think they can break you before anyone finds out. I remember once asking my father why we still flew coach sometimes. Even though we could afford better, he smiled and said, because the world needs to see what respect looks like before the tuxedo. I did not wear a tuxedo that day. I wore jeans with lint on the cuffs, my favorite sneakers, and a hoodie that smelled faintly of shea butter and fabric softener. I looked like 100 other black girls going somewhere, but I was the only one who seen the inside of an assembly hall. And yet, here I was being treated like a suspect, because even in America, diplomacy has skin. They did not ask where I would been. They did not ask why my boarding pass had Diplo printed in red. They did not ask anything. They just assumed. My hands were still trembling when Officer Cartwright returned with another agent. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, Latino, unsure. He avoided eye contact. This her? He asked. Yup. Cartwright said, just wanted confirmation. Said she has got a passport. Cartwright rolled her eyes. Yeah, claims she is some diplomat's kid. You believe that? He looked at me, just for a second. Something flickered. Did you check the credentials? I looked. It is blue. Could be anything. The man shifted his weight. You know, those diplomatic passports have microchips. You can scan it. Cartwright bristled. I know that. He gently stepped forward, picked up my passport, and walked over to a scanner on the wall. Beep. Green light, then a pause. Then another beep louder. The screen lit up. Words appeared. He stared at it, blinked, then looked back at me. His whole body changed. His shoulders straightened. His face turned pale. He turned slowly to Cartwright. You need to call the supervisor. Now. Why? She snapped. He held up the screen. She is a class A diplomatic dependent. Under Article 29 of the Vienna Convention, she has full immunity. You have detained her illegally. Cartwright froze. For the first time, her lip trembled. I stood up, slowly, and I said, calmly, clearly, you never even looked, you just assumed, because of my skin, because of my clothes. But now, everyone's going to see what you did. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I picked up my passport, held it to my chest, and whispered to myself, I am the daughter of diplomacy. And today, silence ends. The moment I stepped out of that holding room, everything changed. But not in the way I expected. I thought the hallway would be empty. I thought they would try to sneak me out quietly, like a mistake hidden under fluorescent lights. But no, the terminal was chaos. Because while Officer Linda Cartwright was busy flexing her badge in a white-walled room, the world outside had moved on, and not in her favor. You see, someone had been recording. A passenger, a quiet woman with large glasses and a baby strapped to her chest. She had stood in line right behind me, watching it all unfold. Her name was Veronica Moore, a mother of 3, civil rights attorney, and part-time blogger. She would live stream the whole scene. From the moment Cartwright first yelled at me, to the second they led me away like a criminal. Veronica's phone had been pointed straight at us. Her video had over 300,000 views in under 2 hours. When I walked out of that room, the crowd parted, not out of fear but shame. Eyes darted away. Phones tilted. The whispers began. That is the girl. Wasn't she just? Diplomatic passport. To Cess in trouble now. And then I saw him, my father. Ambassador Malcolm Thompson was not a man who rushed. He moved with the grace of gravity itself. Charcoal suit on lapel pin, beard trimmed sharp. Eyes sharper. He had arrived minutes earlier. And when the agents refused to let him back there, he had simply said, I am not here to raise my voice. I am here to raise the truth. He would pulled up the Vienna Convention on his phone. Cited codes, dates, and precedents. One guard tried to shush him. It did not go well. Now, he was walking toward me with outstretched arms. My daughter. He said, Are you all right? I nodded, then buried my face in his chest. For the first time since Geneva, I let a tear fall. Just one. Behind us, Cartwright emerged from the side room. She did not look victorious anymore. She looked like someone who realized the audience had changed, and now the cameras were pointed at her. Veronica stepped forward. Madame, she said, coolly, do you have any comment on why a minor with a diplomatic passport was detained without cause? Cartwright blinked. Her mouth opened slightly. She was wearing a hoodie. Gasps. Murmurs. A teenage boy nearby muttered. A hoodie. Seriously, my father turned. Officer Cartwright, allow me to quote Article 29. The person of a diplomatic agent shall be inviolable. Do you know what that means? She did not answer. Another TSA official approached, one rank above her assistant director Marcus Levine, a black man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a clipboard that now felt like a guillotine. As Cartwright, he said, please step aside. We need to debrief immediately. Her eyes narrowed. I was doing my job. Levine's voice was calm but stern. Your job does not include racial profiling or detaining minors without following protocol. And it certainly does not include ignoring unissued diplomatic ed. Cameras flashed. People gasped. Then came the twist. One of the technicians from the security room, a young woman named Elise, walked up holding a tablet. I think you need to hear this, she said. She pressed play. And suddenly, through the terminal loudspeakers, we all heard Linda Cartwright's voice, a recording from the security mic in the holding room, accidentally broadcasted to the TISA office. I do not care what kind of passport she has. That kid fits the profile. Hoodie. Backpack. Attitude. She thinks she is above the rules. Not today. Dead silence. Everyone froze. It was not just racism. It was caught-on-tape racism. Veronica's live stream caught the moment. The public saw a white officer admit she ignored international law because a black girl wore a hoodie. This was not about security anymore. This was about power, about judgment, about a system that let a badge become a crown. My father looked at me. Do you want to press charges? I did not answer right away. I looked around at the passengers, the press, the children watching from behind velvet ropes. I remembered something my mother once said. Sometimes, justice does not wear handcuffs. Sometimes, it wears a headline. So I turned to Cartwright, and I said, you thought your microphone was off, but the world was always listening. She stepped back, her badge trembling in her hand. Levine took it from her. You are suspended. Effective immediately. Cheers erupted. Someone clapped. Then another. Soon the entire terminal was applauding, not just for me, but for what we all knew. Truth had just punched through silence. A TISA agent brought me my bag. Inside was my passport, my phone, and a small note slipped in by Elise. Thank you for not screaming. Thank you for standing. That night, I trended. #diplomatic daughter. But this was not just my story anymore. This was America's mirror, and it cracked wide open. The next morning, I woke up to three things: a blinding sunrise over the Washington skyline, a phone vibrating off my nightstand, and my father staring at the news with a look I had only seen once when my mother died. Amani, he said, gently, you have gone viral. Not just local, not just national. International. The video of my detainment had hit 2.7 million views overnight. The headlines were not subtle. Black teen with unpassport illegally detained at Jeff. SA officer suspended after racial profiling goes public. Daughter of us, diplomat faces airport injustice and stays silent no more. By 9 m. There were interview requests from every major network. Ken, Babes. Al Jazeera. There were calls from talk shows, student groups, human rights councils. My inbox overflowed, but inside me, something else was swelling. Not pride, not fame, guilt, because no matter how many lights turned toward me, I could not forget the hundreds, maybe thousands of other black and brown teens who were pulled aside in airports, streets, schools, and never got a headline. I sat at the kitchen table, same one my mom used to braid my hair at, and just stared at my tea until it went cold. I did not ask for this, I finally said. My father nodded. No one ever does. But now that it is here, I looked up. What am I supposed to do with it? He placed a hand over mine. You already did it. You told the truth. But that was not enough. Later that day, I was invited to speak at a press conference hosted by the Civil Liberties Alliance. It would be televised. International. My father hesitated. You do not owe anyone your pain. Amani. I know. I said, but this is not just about me anymore. And so, at exactly 3:00 p.m., I walked into a room packed wall to wall with cameras, wires, suits, and skepticism. I stood behind a podium that felt too tall. My palms were damp, my knees trembled beneath my slacks. When I opened my mouth, my voice did not shake. My name is Amani Grace Thompson. I am 17 years old. I am a U.S. citizen, and I hold a Class A diplomatic passport under the United Nations Charter. And last Friday, I was illegally detained at JFK Airport not because of a security threat, but because of a stereotype. I paused. Let them sit with that. Then I continued. I was pulled aside, isolated, interrogated, not because of what I carried in my bag, because of what I wore on my back, a hoodie, and the color of the skin beneath it. The officer who detained me did not even scan my documents. She did not care that I was protected under international law. She only saw a black girl and made her decision. Click. Flash. Murmurs. I leaned in. But here's what she did not see. I am not just the daughter of a diplomat. I am the granddaughter of civil rights marchers, the niece of public school teachers, the student of global history. And now, I stand not just for myself, but for every young person who has ever been told, you do not look like you belong. The room was silent, but it was not the uncomfortable silence from the holding room. This one was respect. When I finished, I stepped off the stage and into a sea of open palms, nods, and damp eyes. And then came the twist. A woman approached me, white, late 30s, professional skirt suit, and a media badge. Her name tag read, Kristen Lockhart. Senior correspondent. Global Wire News. I want to apologize. She said, 2 years ago, covered a story about a young Somali boy who was detained at an airport in Minneapolis. He did not have a passport, just a refugee permit. I did not tell it properly. I did not fight hard enough for him to be heard. I stared at her. I covered it like a security concern, not a civil rights issue. I saw the guilt in her eyes, the same guilt I felt this morning. And then something happened I did not expect. I hugged her. Not because I forgave her, but because grace must live where justice begins. Later that evening, back at home, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and turned on the news, not to watch myself, but to hear the conversations. And I heard them. Anchors asking, why are NATSA agents required to be trained in diplomatic law? Why do racial profiles still persist in our airport security models? I heard debate panels quoting Article 29. I heard black mothers cry on call in shows, saying my daughter wears hoodies too. That could have been her, and I realized they did not want my voice until it made them uncomfortable. But now, it was echoing into the places it had never been allowed before. Before bed, I opened my journal, an old leather-bound book my mom gave me, and wrote just 6 words. This is not justice, but it is start. Justice does not always arrive with a gavel or a breaking headline. Sometimes, it walks in quietly through the voice of a stranger who can no longer stay silent. It was 3 days after the press conference. I was sitting at the breakfast table, cradling a warm mug of peppermint tea, when my father lowered the newspaper slowly and said, "Amani, you need to see this." He turned the screen of his tablet toward me. Former TSA employee speaks out. I was told to target them. I blinked, scrolled, then read every single word. A former TSA staffer, Deshaun Rivers, had come forward. He would worked at Jeff for 7 years before quietly resigning last fall, citing a toxic chain of racialized directives. He had not named names before, but now he did. Officer Cartwright routinely flagged Black and Latino teens for additional screening. She used phrases like urban profile and trouble look. I complained twice. Nothing happened. The 3rd time, they moved me to baggage claim. The article went viral in hours. And then came the wave. A woman named Ananya Patel, 23, posted a thread. Cartwright pulled me aside in 2021. I was wearing a hijab and flying to Chicago for grad school interviews. She made me remove my headscarf. In public. A father, James Herrera, added, "My son, 14, mixed race, was separated from us during a flight to Ella." Cartwright called him a lone flyer. I will never forget the fear on his face. One by one, the bystanders became storytellers. And once the flood started, there was no dam strong enough to stop it. That morning, we got a call from the Senate Committee on Civil Oversight. They wanted me to testify. I froze. I am just a teenager. I said, I am not ready for Capitol Hill. But my father looked me in the eyes. You do not have to be ready. You just have to be real. And so I went. I wore a navy blue blazer, my mother's silver pin, and the same hoodie underneath gray, soft, a silent badge of resilience. The room was packed, cameras in every corner. Behind me sat Veronica Moore, Deshaun Rivers, Ananya Patel, and even James Herrera's son, holding his dad's hand. I sat down. The chair creaked beneath me. I adjusted the mic and spoke. Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, my name is Imani Grace Thompson, and I am here to talk about what happens when people in power forget that the people they serve have names, rights, and dignity. I told them everything, not just about me, About them. About how silence becomes complicity. How policies become prejudice. And how a single officer's unchecked power had ignited a storm she never imagined. Then I looked straight at the ranking senator, an older white man who had not made eye contact with me once. And I said, "If I had been your granddaughter, would I have been treated that way?" Silence. And then, a shift. He looked up, just for a moment, but it was enough. The committee voted to open a federal inquiry into TISA racial profiling procedures. They also issued a subpoena for all JFF surveillance footage involving Officer Cartwright over the last 5 years. That afternoon, Cartwright released a statement through her attorney. "My actions were rooted in training and protocol. I never intended to cause harm. I regret if my conduct was misinterpreted." Misinterpreted. The world erupted. Talk shows replayed the footage. Editorials dragged the hollow apology. Civil rights lawyers issued open letters. But it was Veronica Moore, that quiet mother with the baby and the blog, who said it best. "They are not misinterpreting you, Linda. They are finally interpreting you out loud." That same day, I received an email from Elise, the young security tech who played the mic audio in the terminal. She wrote, "Amani, you gave me courage. I am submitting a report to the Inspector General. For 3 years, I watched things happen and said nothing. Not anymore." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning softly above me, and realized something. I did not set out to start a movement. I just did not want to be erased. But maybe that is how movements begin, not with thunder, but with a whisper that refuses to fade. It began with a ping. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed. A new email. The subject line read, "For your eyes only, do not forward." From Ramosetsa, Gov. My hands froze. Elise. I wiped my hands on my towel, sat down on my bed, and clicked. Inside was a single sentence. "They never turned off the backup system. This file was never deleted." And beneath it, a video attachment. I hesitated for just a second before pressing play. The screen went black. Then a timestamp appeared. 04:52 p.m. AFC Security Room B3. 3 days ago. My face appeared framed in fluorescent lighting. Hoodie up, eyes calm but tired. Then came the voice. Officer Linda Cartwright. Except this was not what the public had already heard. This was worse. Honestly, I do not care what her badge says. Cartwright muttered, sipping from a paper cup. "Half of these kids lie anyway. Give them a fake passport and a sad story. And suddenly we are supposed to bow." A male voice unidentified chimed in. "You serious? That one looked legit. She is not legit." Cartwright snapped. "She is a black kid in a hoodie. You give them too much room. They think they are above the rules." The man laughed, nervous, uncertain. Cartwright continued, her voice lower, sharper. "You know what the problem is. The more we let them through, the more they think they belong, but they do not. Not really. Not with those faces. That walk. That tone. You saw how she looked at me like I owed her something. Pause. A sip. She needs to learn who is in charge in this country. And trust me, I am gonna make sure she remembers. The video ended. I sat in silence, the words echoing in my ears like poison. This was not just racism. This was not just misconduct. This was a confession, an ideology, a declaration of war on kids like me. I forwarded the video to my father. 1 minute later, he called. His voice trembled not with fear, but with fury. "This is the moment," he said. "Are you ready to make it public?" I swallowed. My hand shook over the trackpad. Let us do it. That night, we released it. Veronica helped us draft the statement. Elise, under whistleblower protection, confirmed the authenticity. We posted the video to a secure server, then shared it on every major platform with a simple caption. "The truth they didn't want you to hear." In under 2 hours, it hit 1 million views. Then 5. #SheBelongshare started trending globally. Cartwright's name became synonymous with everything the system had tried to pretend did not exist. Racial bias. Unchecked authority. State-sanctioned humiliation. Journalists flooded the Department of Homeland Security with questions. Civil rights groups demanded immediate criminal charges. Congress scheduled an emergency hearing. Cartwright disappeared. She stopped reporting to work. Her lawyer issued a frantic statement, saying she was emotionally overwhelmed and temporarily unavailable for comment. But it did not matter. The truth was already out. For me, the storm did not feel like victory. It felt like justice, yes, but heavy. Exhausting. Like breathing after drowning. That night, I did something strange. I returned to the terminal. My father did not ask why. He just drove. I walked to the same gate where it all started, the same polished floor, the same blue uniformed guards, except now they averted their eyes. One of them, a woman in her 20s, stepped forward hesitantly as, "Thompson, I just wanted to say I saw the footage, and I am sorry. You should not have had to go through that." I nodded. No anger, just calm. She continued, voice barely above a whisper, and, "Thank you, because some of us on the inside, we have been scared to speak. You gave us the push." I looked past her at the long row of passengers lining up. Brown, white, veiled, tattooed, suited, barefoot toddlers and tired parents. All of them, just trying to get somewhere. All of them, hoping to be seen as people, not profiles. And I realized, maybe this was not just my fight anymore. Maybe it never had been. On the ride home, I stared out the window at the dark highway, headlights whizzing by like comets, and I wrote in my journal. Her words were meant to shame me, but now they testify against her. Truth remembers, and so do we. The U.S. Capitol dome gleamed beneath a pale Washington sun, its marble walls whispering echoes of centuries-old promises, some broken, some just delayed. And that morning, I was walking toward it. My name is Amani Grace Thompson, 17 years old, black, daughter of a U.S. diplomat and a humanitarian. I wore my navy blue blazer again, the gray hoodie zipped underneath, and in my hand was not just my statement, but every story like mine that was never heard. Inside, the Congressional Oversight Committee on Civil Liberties was in full session. The video had shattered the dam. Public outrage was wildfire. Over 6.3 million people had signed a petition for reform. And now, the Capitol Rotunda was packed not just with lawmakers and media, but with faces like mine. Students, mothers, veterans, immigrants, kids in hoodies. I stepped through security flanked by my father, Ambassador Malcolm Thompson, and our family attorney. Cameras flashed like lightning, but I walked straight, shoulders square. Head high, we passed Veronica Moore, clutching her baby. Elise Ramos, the SATEC-turned whistleblower, gave me a nod from the public seating row. Behind them sat Deshaun Rivers, Ananya Patel, and dozens of others who had once been silenced. But not today. The gavel fell. Committee will come to order. Congresswoman Julia Robles, chairwoman, tapped her pen against her folder. She was Latina, poised, and not one for small talk. We are here to address the unlawful detainment of U.S. citizen and diplomatic dependent as Amani Grace Thompson, and to examine systemic racial profiling within federal transportation security agencies. My name echoed in the chamber like a bell. They called witnesses first. Elise detailed the suppressed recordings. Deshaun described how Cartwright's internal complaints were buried. A policy expert testified Houtza had no formal mandatory training in diplomatic rights, none. Then they called her Linda Cartwright. She entered quietly, no uniform, just a dark gray pantsuit. No badges left. She looked smaller, less certain, less smug. She sat, adjusted her mic, and read from a prepared statement. I deeply regret my actions. I believed I was following protocol. I misjudged the situation. I watched every word land like ash. Not fire. Not remorse. Just damage control. When the committee asked her if she had reviewed the Vienna Convention, she blinked. I am not familiar with that document. Gasps. Even the stenographer paused her typing. Chairwoman Robles turned to me as, Thompson, the floor is yours. I stood. My heart thumped so hard it felt like thunder in my chest. When I opened my mouth, I did not read. I spoke 3 weeks ago. I was treated like a threat for wearing a hoodie. I was treated like a liar for holding a diplomatic passport. I was treated like I did not belong in my own country. I turned to Cartwright. But this is not just about you. This is about every system that told you it was okay. Every supervisor who ignored the complaints. Every training session that never existed. Every camera pointed the wrong way. I looked at the committee. I am 17. I should be worried about prom or college apps. But instead, I am here asking you to remember what it feels like to be presumed dangerous before you speak. I paused, then looked to the gallery, to the kids watching this, wondering if their hoodie makes them un-American. I am here to say, no. You are not the problem. The system is. A long silence followed. Even the senators stopped shifting in their seats. Even the marble felt still. Then, unexpectedly, Chairwoman Robles spoke softly, as, Thompson, you have said more in 5 minutes than this chamber has in 5 years. That moment did not just feel historic. It felt human. They voted that day unanimously. Mandatory training on diplomatic rights for ALTSA staff. A full audit of racially motivated detentions in federal agencies. A formal apology. Delivered on the congressional record, to me and my family. But none of it mattered more than what came next. When I exited the chamber, I was met by a sea of quiet applause. No cheering. Just reverence. And from the center stepped a young boy, maybe 12, dark skin. Oversized hoodie, eyes wide with both fear and admiration. He did not say anything, just raised his fist to his chest and tapped twice. I knew what it meant. I see you. I hear you. I am you. I leaned down and whispered, "Never take it off. Your hoodie is not a threat. It is armor." And in that moment, even Congress held its breath. 3 days after my testimony shook Capitol Hill, the ripple became a wave. Not just within the marbled halls of Congress, not just on news tickers, but across cities, schools, terminals, living rooms. For the first time, the people who had always watched quietly began moving. It started with a letter from the White House. An embossed envelope slid under our front door, hand-delivered by a uniformed aide. Inside, on official stationery, were just 4 lines. "Miss Thompson, your voice reminded a nation of its conscience. We would be honored to meet you. President Camille D. Foster." I blinked, not because I did not believe it, but because deep down, I never expected the walls that ignored so many to open for me. But they did. The next day, my father and I stood on the south lawn, facing the great pillars of the White House, the same place he once stood as a young intern decades ago. President Foster greeted us personally, America's first black woman president, wearing a crimson suit and eyes that saw right through excuses. "You reminded us all," she said softly as she hugged me, "that silence is not strength, and endurance is not justice." She invited me to speak at the Youth Civil Rights Summit hosted in the East Room. I was no longer just a witness. I was becoming a voice, one they could no longer dismiss. And it did not stop there. Airlines began rolling out bias-free boarding protocols. Schools launched Know Your Rights seminars, led by students like me. The Department of Transportation appointed Elise Ramos as head of the new Civil Oversight Division, one specifically focused on minority traveler protections. Meanwhile, Officer Linda Cartwright, she was charged with civil rights violations, obstruction of protocol, and unlawful detainment of a minor with diplomatic status. Her trial date was set, and this time, everyone would be watching. But justice was not just happening in courts. It was happening in conversations. A boy named Marcus sent me a video from his high school in Ohio wearing a hoodie, walking confidently through metal detectors. Today they did not pull me aside. He said, "They just said, 'Good morning.' I think it is because of you." A girl in Florida wrote, "Our civics teacher made us watch your speech. I never thought someone who looked like me could talk to Congress and not be talked over." These were not praise notes. They were impact notes. I was not famous. I was amplified. My journal, once a place for secrets and soft wishes, was now filled with headlines, quotes, and folded-up notes from strangers who felt seen. But one message stayed with me more than any other. From Veronica Moore, the mother whose phone first captured the injustice. Amani, they always told us to survive quietly. You chose to stand loudly. And because of that, my daughter will grow up knowing she never has to shrink to be safe. I sat on my bedroom floor that night, rereading her words, tears slipping down my cheeks, not from pain this time, but from release. This was not just my story anymore. It belonged to every quiet girl who was taught to avoid eye contact, to every teen who was told you talked too much when they asked questions, to every child who ever heard, "You are not supposed to be here." Now we were here, and we were writing our own names in the margins of their laws. I was scheduled to fly again soon, this time to speak at the United Nations Youth Assembly in Geneva. Full circle. Before the flight, my father looked at me from across the kitchen table, where our journey had always begun. "Are you scared?" "No," I said. "Just steady." He nodded. "You wear that hoodie again." I grinned. Every time. And as I packed my bag that night, folding the gray fabric like armor, I knew this. I did not ask to lead, but I was never meant to follow. The air in Geneva felt different. Crisper. Quieter. As if the city knew the weight of the voices it carried. I had returned to the place where this all began, not as a daughter traveling under a diplomat's shadow, but as a speaker, a delegate, and to many, a symbol. The United Nations Youth Assembly convened in the grand marble hall of the Place des Nations. Banners from every country hung above our heads. Translations echoed in 6 languages. The air buzzed with camera crews, dignitaries, and stories waiting to be told. My badge read, Amani Grace Thompson, Delegate, United States of America. Topic, Civil Liberties and Discrimination in Security Systems. But my speech went far beyond borders. Backstage, I waited. My gray hoodie was zipped beneath my navy blazer again. My fingers clutched the sleeves, not from fear, but from memory. From grounding. My father stood nearby, quiet but proud. "You do not speak for the badge." He whispered, "You speak for every person who has ever been stopped before their dream could start." The master of ceremony called my name. I stepped onto the circular stage under the UN. Seal, lights warm on my skin, 193 flags at my back, and the world waiting in silence. I took a breath, then began. When I was detained at JFK Airport 3 weeks ago, they did not just question my documents. They questioned my right to belong. Pause. I am 17. I hold a diplomatic passport. I had all the papers, all the clearance, all the rights. And still, none of it protected me from the power of a single assumption. I looked across the room at delegates from Ghana, China, France, Haiti, South Korea, Brazil. This is not an American story. This is a global disease where power and fear mix, where uniforms forget empathy, where silence becomes policy. I continued. In Nigeria, teens are profiled by officers under the guise of anti-cybercrime sweeps. In India, Dalit children are forced to go barefoot into schools that one seat them with others. In France, girls are told their hijabs threaten public order. In the US, my hoodie was seen as a threat before I ever spoke a word. I paused again, then dropped my line. Profiling is not protection, and silence is not peace. The room stirred. I leaned in. We talk about global peace, but there is no peace without dignity. No freedom without the right to exist without suspicion. Then I raised my hand and pulled back the sleeve of my hoodie. This I said. Pointing to the cloth was seen as a weapon. But it was my mother's. She gave it to me before she died. She said it would keep me warm, safe, my real weapon. Is this? I lifted my voice. This truth. This microphone, and all of you. And in that moment, the silence was not empty. It was reverent. Then, thunderous applause. Not polite, not diplomatic, real, loud. From the belly, tears in some eyes, fists raised in others, youth clapping beside ministers, truth spilling beyond boundaries. Afterward, as I stepped down, I was greeted not by cameras but by voices. A girl from Kenya hugged me. You told my story. A trans teen from Poland said, you gave me words I have never dared to speak. A boy from South Sudan whispered, your hoodie. It looks like mine. That night, I stood outside my hotel, wind brushing against the shores of Lake Geneva, lights reflecting off the water. I watched the stars scatter over the old city and realized I had not come here to be seen. I had come here to make others visible. I pulled out my journal and wrote. What they tried to bury grew. They turned a hoodie into a headline, and I turned that into a movement. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Elise. Cartwright's trial date announced. They are calling you as the lead witness. I stared at the screen, then up at the sky. It was not over, but I was not afraid anymore. Because now, the world was listening. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not because of the air, but because of what it represented. A place where truth is weighed like evidence, where pain must be translated into testimony, and where sometimes the most powerful statement is not shouted but delivered with eyes wide open. That morning, Amani Grace Thumps and me walked into the federal courthouse of the Eastern District of New York as the key witness in a landmark civil rights trial, the United States v. Linda Cartwright. It had been exactly 42 days since she pulled me out of a line and made me feel invisible. And now, all eyes were on her. She sat at the defense table, suit pressed, hair tighter, but hands restless. The confident posture from the airport, gone. All that remained was a woman facing the full weight of her own reflection. Beside me sat my father. He looked ahead not with vengeance, but with expectation, as if justice was not a question, but an overdue answer. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. The jury settled. The judge, a black woman with silver braids and stern dignity, nodded toward the prosecutor. Call your next witness. They called my name. I stood, walked past rows of press, activists, strangers who now carried my face on shirts. But I was not walking for them. I was walking for the scared girl in that Tessa room, the one who kept her hands visible while being told her passport did not matter. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. Then I took the stand. What happened on the day of March 3rd? Miss Thompson, the prosecutor asked. I did not read notes. I did not pause. I told them everything, from the shout that froze my spine, to the fluorescent lights in the windowless room, to Cartwright's words, "She is not legit. She is a black kid in a hoodie." The courtroom listened like it had lungs full of air it did not dare exhale. And what were you thinking as this happened? I turned to the jury. I kept wondering how many others had been treated like me, but did not have a microphone. Didn't he have a passport to defend them? Didn't have the world watching. I took a deep breath. She did not just detain me. She diminished me. Not for what I did, but for who I am. Silence again. Then came cross-examination. Cartwright's lawyer stood tall, crisp, voice like steel. Miss Thompson, is it possible Officer Cartwright was simply following protocol? No. I replied, firm. Protocol does not ask you to ignore diplomatic aid. It does not ask you to assume guilt based on appearance. It does not ask you to erase someone before you have met them. He shifted. Could it be she was overwhelmed? Under pressure. Trying to keep travelers safe. I looked directly at Cartwright. I was 17. Alone. Peaceful. Holding a valid passport. She was not overwhelmed. She was comfortable. She would done it before. The courtroom stirred. And then, just before I stepped down, the judge did something rare. She leaned forward. Miss Thompson, she said, is there anything else you want to say to the defendant directly? I turned to face Linda Cartwright, the woman who once looked at me like a shadow. I stood taller. You thought I was forgettable, but now your words live in a courtroom. Your voice once used to silence is now evidence. I inhaled, then softened, not to spare her, but to free me. I do not need you to say sorry, because I did not come here to get even. I came here to show the world what happens when a girl stands where she was told to kneel. And with that, I left the stand. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They returned with a guilty verdict on all counts. Unlawful detainment, violation of civil rights, abuse of authority. As Cartwright was led out, she turned back for a second, just a second, and our eyes met. Not with anger, not with hatred. With finality. I was not her prisoner anymore. I was her consequence. Outside, a sea of people waited. The steps of the courthouse overflowed with children in hoodies. Parents. Students. Reporters. Change makers. Banners read, "Let us through. Dignity isn't suspicious. We all belong in line." And then, the most surreal thing, a young girl 10, maybe 11, walked up to me and offered her hoodie. "It is new," she whispered, "but I want you to have it. You made mine mean something." I hugged her tight, tears hot and silent. I did not need to speak, because everything I had ever feared was now behind me. That night, at home, my father and I sat on the porch. The stars stretched wide. The world felt still. He handed me a letter postmarked Geneva. Inside was a single line from the UN. Secretary General. One voice echoed through an institution, and the world leaned in. "Thank you." I opened my journal, the last page. and wrote. They detained a girl, but the world met a voice. And the line they tried to push me out of, I now lead. The hoodie still fits. But now, so does the world. She wore a hoodie. She stood in line. She held a valid diplomatic passport. And still she was detained. Humiliated. Dismissed. Until the world watched. Until the world listened. Amani Grace Thompson did not raise her voice. She raised truth. In a system that tried to erase her, she became unforgettable. They saw a threat. She became a leader. From its room to the halls of Congress, to the United Nations stage, Amani transformed injustice into impact. And in doing so, she reminded millions, power means nothing if it is built on fear, but one voice, held steady, can move a country. She taught us that what we wear should never determine how we are treated, that our skin is not a red flag, that silence is not survival, and that sometimes a hoodie becomes history. Your voice matters even when you think no one is listening. The most powerful protest is not always loud. Sometimes, it is a calm child with truth in her pocket and fire in her dignity. Let Amani's story remind us all. Stand up, speak out, and never let them push you out of line. Like stories that expose injustice and uplift real heroes. Then this is for you. Subscribe for more drama stories that empower the voiceless. Comment below. Has anyone ever judged you before knowing your truth? Share this story if you believe no one should be profiled because of how they look. Because when one voice rises, millions find the courage to follow.